Just want to say one of the things that I love about being part of this church and why, even though, to be honest, in the context of the journey, sometimes I have been tempted to leave and forge out on my own because relationship isn't always easy, is it? But I have always returned to, as Joey says, that dying to myself has led me to go further into the conviction that what we do together is better than what I can do on my own. So all of that to say, can we take a moment to thank all of our staff team and leaders and everybody who's had a hold in this? Because I cannot tell you the things that have gone on behind the scenes, and even like navigating the changes, and to be honest, even with some of our team just really dropping some messages and some emails, and it's not the way I would like to do it, but it's like, guys, help. Can you sort that out? And that's the amazing thing of having built up relationships, I think. You don't need to overthink some of those communications because you've got a foundation of relationship. And sometimes you might get a little bit missed, and sometimes you've got to work out it, but we know we're together. So we want to do life that way. In this session, we wanted to talk about discipleship practices. I mean, Joey has been so helpful and given us so much, but we wanted to make sure that you really saw and understand what does this look like in practice. Because I don't know if you've ever had that. I had that with one of my lecturers, actually, a professor, when I was doing engineering. There was a guy who was so masterful at it, and he was so relatable in his communication style that in his lectures, I would be convinced I knew what he was talking about. Until I got down to doing it myself, and I thought, I have no clue about any of this stuff, and I had to go back. We want to do what we can to make sure you don't have that experience, because the win is not that you think, oh, Joey's great, or every nation's a great church, or anything like that. The win is that you are empowered to live this way, and to live this way in your world so that others see it, and you are empowered and effective to pass it on to others. And if you've been around our church for any length of time, you'll know this pass it on thing is something that's always been in our DNA. That's just a part of what we understand discipleship to be. It's like I grow and I pass it on. And I think that's where Joey's teaching is even so rich and takes that to another level, because it's not even I've got to strive to pass it on. I've got to work at it. It's like, no, if I remain in relationship with God, then it's going to overflow from my life. And our trust is and our hope is that as we live this way, even we'll experience that what Peter is talking about in the Bible when he says, always be prepared to give a reason for the hope you have. That kind of presupposes that we're living a life that causes people to look and think and say, can I have some of what you've got? And ultimately, that's the story, that's the main story in a lot of these kinds of people. But anyway, we want to talk about discipleship practices. And I want to just maybe just help you by starting with, I've been leading campus ministry in our congregation for about 2.5 years now. I took over leading campus ministry when Jarvan and Brittany, who we love and so thankful that they are back with us and back on team, but Brittany's had some health challenges and she was in the States, and Jarvan, there was a particular difficult year where it was hard for them in life and it was hard for them in ministry, and the right thing for them to do was for Jarvan to go back to the States, and it left us with a sort of, okay, what are we going to do about campus ministry? And a whole load of things came together, and basically, I mean, I think the story of my life in my life and in this church is like, well, okay, I'll do it. Amazing thing can happen when you just stick your hand up and say, if there's a need, I'll do it. I might not be the best person, but I'm willing, and you can decide for yourself if I'm the best person. I don't know, but I'm just going to be available. I'm going to be willing. I'm going to serve, and we're going to go. And that came together with some things that God was saying. But as we were looking at campus ministry, and I was looking at that year, I'm a bit of a strategic thinker, and I have a big vision, and sometimes these things can get a little bit complicated and overwhelming for me. And like, how do we actually move into that? And I really felt God saying to me, Dan, whatever you do, just do it with faith, hope, and love. And if you do it with faith and hope and love, I will bless it no matter what it is. And I had another prophetic word that really kind of affirmed God was saying, I've chosen you to be you. And it reminded me of something my gran used to say, and she told me when I went into ministry, she said, Dan, be yourself. Preach yourself. So many people are trying to be something else. Just be yourself. So we went into it, and I thought, well, what am I? Well, I'm a worshiper, and I'm somebody who's consistently over many years just through relationship and through groups made disciples. And that's who I am. That's what I do. So we started doing that on campus. And then I also felt God say to me very specifically, particularly as we come up to the second year. And I thought, okay, now, God, we're going to get going with these leadership plans we've got, with these programs that I have in mind. I felt him saying, Dan, build people, not programs. And as we got going with that, we've seen some exciting things happen, and we're still on a journey. And as Joey says, slow is fast, but I know that what we do is going to last. And I'm thankful for the more laborers and the more leaders that are adding, and I'm so thankful that it doesn't depend on me, because, man, that would be not a good situation. But as we build people, not programs. But the question remains, how do we actually do that? How do we actually do that? And we're going to talk about a few things that just help you understand and model in and see in practice what does that look like. I will make sure this is on. And a reminder that of our discipleship goal as well. Really, this is what Joey has been talking about. You've got it on those screens up there, right? Okay, fantastic. Our discipleship goal ultimately in all that we do is growing relationship with God, God's people, and lost people. And what we talk about sometimes on campus and in our Connect groups is ultimately we want to be friends who follow Jesus together. And that's where sometimes you just got to find a language that works for people. If you've got it in your hearts, well, that's what we're there to be. This is who we are, called to be friends who follow Jesus together. And I say that because, particularly when we talk about discipleship meetings and discipleship groups, you will find all sorts of stuff out there in the world. And we're in an information-rich age. And it's really important that you know what the goal is. Because some people will say, oh, this is your plan for running a great small group. But their goal is just that we are community. Or some people will say, this is your plan for running a great small group, but it's all about evangelizing and going there. For us, it's, as Wolfie said earlier, it's all of that in many ways, but ultimately it's discipleship. It's disciples. It's are we growing and following Jesus, and are other people catching that? Now, I want to talk about discipleship Jesus style, because I think the amazing thing about Jesus is that he was the master disciple maker, obviously. If you want to know what it means to be a disciple who makes disciples, look at Jesus. He was the master of following his Father, and he was the master of making disciples. And ultimately, everything we see that is the church, that is the kingdom advancing in our world today, it's because Jesus made disciples, isn't it? So yes, we are saved because he died on the cross and he rose again and he fulfilled the gospel. But if he'd have just beamed in and done that and beamed out, we wouldn't have what we have today. We have what we have because God came to earth with flesh on. As the message says, he moved into the neighborhood so people could see him. And what did he do? He ministered to people and he led them on a journey. He said, come follow me and I will make you fishers of men. Now, discipleship Jesus style goes from crowds to individuals to groups. And this is kind of where we're going and what we're going to help you with. Crowds to individuals to groups. I don't know if you've noticed, but the world seems to be getting busier and busier and more crowded and more people. I don't know, maybe with Brexit it'll become less. I doubt it somehow. Okay, I'll have to check my audience here. But we're faced with it all the time, aren't we? We're faced with crowds of people, sometimes with overwhelming needs. And sometimes it can become so overwhelming, we think, man, I can't be the answer to everything. And sometimes that causes us to shrink back and do nothing. The answer that Jesus had was to minister to the crowds, but ultimately also spot the individuals. Have you noticed that as you look through the stories? Jesus was walking through and he would teach crowds and he would minister to crowds, but he always had time to spot the person where there was a ministry moment. You see Zacchaeus up in the tree. I mean, he's not so busy with his what he's doing in his life that he's to spot Zacchaeus and say, come down, I'm going to spend time with you. The woman with the issue of blood, he's on his way, he's very busy, he's very important, he's about to heal somebody, but he pauses and says, hang on, some power's flowed out of me. There's a moment here. Now, this is a challenge because I remember when I was not working for the church, when I was working for a telecoms development company. It was only after I'd finished working that job and was working for the church that I reconnected with one of the guys that was probably my closest work colleague. And I found out that during some of that period of time when I was working with him, he was actually separated from his wife. And he was going through some really difficult stuff. And I was so glad I could find that out afterwards. But it challenged me. Am I busy kind of just doing the crowd stuff? And even when I talk about making disciples, am I talking about this mass of people? Or am I seeing the person? And I could see sometimes where he was a bit short, where he was impatient, sometimes where he reacted a certain way. And I thought, we're going to have just to be a little bit careful with that. But I never took the time at that time to lean in a bit closer and find out why. Why are you like that? What's going on in your life? Jesus was the master at doing that. Crowds to individuals. But he didn't just leave it there. This ministry moment, he knows just you and God is not enough. In fact, God said that. It is not good for man to be alone. So God says that it's not enough, just me and God. Have you ever thought about that? So he adds us to people. And that's the story of discipleship that you see Jesus as he goes and makes disciples. He goes up to Peter. And Peter has this moment. It was like, depart from me, Lord, I'm a sinful man. Get away from me. And he says, no. Come and follow me. And I will make you a fisher of men. And bring your brother Andrew. And bring James and John, your partners. Have you noticed how he started with almost like a ready-formed group? That your partners, these friends, let's get going on the mission. But he didn't leave it there. Then you see him going up to Levi, the tax collector. Again, doing crowd ministry, spotting this tax collector. I mean, maybe the Holy Spirit prompted. I mean, whatever happens there. I mean, this is how discipleship works. And he sees Levi and he says, Levi, there's something in you. God's got something for you. I've got something for you. Come and follow me. And I will make you a fisher of men. And Levi doesn't just have this personal interaction with Jesus. He's added to this group of disciples. And it doesn't just stay there. Because Levi then goes with them. They all go to Levi's house. So you see this crowd moving to this individual person who encounters Jesus, to this group community. This is where we need to understand that when we talk about small groups, discipleship groups, connect groups, whatever we talk about, we're not talking about a program. We're talking about a way of doing life the way God designed us to live it. It is not good for man to be alone. We need to experience Jesus personally, but then we need to be added to a bunch of people. This is what he does, crowds and individuals and groups. And this is why we emphasize so much our small groups, our connect groups, our discipleship groups, whatever you call them. This is also why when you come along to the follow course or anything like that, that we break into groups and we're deliberately trying to help people find this group discipleship life. This is also why, as we've planned and run this day, we didn't want you just to come along as an individual, meet with God and go out. Because it's the context of group, community, or ultimately friends and family that we are changed and we're empowered to do life. So that's the context. This is discipleship, Jesus style. It is a lifestyle. And one of the patterns that we talk about, we're talking about discipleship practice and patterns. And again, this is not program, this is not process. This is just a way of helping you understand how you can live this way. Firstly, identify specific people. Well, practically, when we talk about praying for people, when we talk about praying for people in your workplace, praying for people on your campus, is that just a mass of people, or is that specific people? Is that John? Is that Dave? Is that Sarah? Who is that? We don't want to just be talking about a flock. We want to be talking about people, because our heart is just not moved at the flock level, or our heart is moved with compassion, as Jesus was for the crowd. They were hopeless, they were helpless, they were like sheep without a shepherd. But ultimately, change happens when we get a heart for the individual person, identify specific people, intercede for specific needs. And again, this is a challenge, because I can know specific people, but do I know the state of their lives? Do I know their challenges? Do I know what they're going through? Do I have the time to know that John is out of work at the moment? He's really struggling to make ends meet. As I come to God in that prayer and I pray for those people, do I know what I need to pray for? Because again, that moves my heart towards them. We want to invest in building friendships. Again, this is discipleship is what? Relationship. And ultimately, that's friendship, isn't it? That's deeper than just I love you. That's I know about you. We're building trust with one another. And then we're going to invite to take next steps. And in the context of relationship is determined that invitation. Because for some people, the next step will be, hey, I've got a group of friends. We're getting together for a barbecue. Why don't you come around and join us? For some people, it will be invite you like, would you like to, we've been talking about Jesus. I've got this little booklet, Why Jesus? Do you want to go and read it? And then we can get together for coffee and talk about it. It could be invite to my group. It could be invite to my church. But the point is, you don't know what an effective invite even is unless you've been through who are the people? What are their needs? I've built a friendship. You trust me. I've got to know you. I think what we have here could be the answer to that. Again, it comes out of relationship. I just wanted to take a pause right now before I move on to anything else. If discipleship is a relationship, if this not just a crowd of people, the crowd loneliness that we have in London, but it's specific people, who are those for you? Who are some specific people that God is impressing on your heart even right now, or will right now if you ask Him, if you let Him? Who are the specific people that you could minister to, you could build a friendship with, you could pray for? Let's just take 2 minutes to come before God and say, God, who are you revealing to me? Who are those people? Okay, we're going to carry on. And maybe I'll say this as well. I've also just written some names in my journal here, because I've learned that one of the most dangerous things, particularly as a pastor, but at every level, is we tell people to do something that we're not doing ourselves. Man, God has challenged me so many times to be like, Dan, lead yourself first. Do it yourself first. Pass on what I'm doing in you and what you're responding to. Don't tell other people. Sometimes those things that I'm telling you, they're not actually for other people. I know you've got a teacher gift, but they're not for other people. They're for you right now. In me first as a pattern. That's what Paul talks about. So anyway, who are those people? Put that into practice. Pray for them. Spend time praying for them. Invest in those relationships. Invite to take next steps. But we're going to talk now about a pattern, a simple pattern that will help you with the skill of how do I do discipleship in a way that helps people experience God and all that He has for you. And again, we want you to understand that any process we talk about, any skill doesn't work if you don't have the heart. It doesn't work if you don't have what Joey was talking about earlier, the heart for people, the relationships, the understanding of what it is we do. If particularly in our world, if we just try and process people, it not only will not work, it will repel them. Yeah? And probably you're going to meet some people in your life, and God's going to use you to minister to some people, I believe, who they have been repelled by Christians that they've met before. Going way, way back when we had another phase of doing home alpha, and I'm so excited we've picked that up again. But I remember Amanda at the school gate, again with one of those school mums, had a conversation with one of those mums, and she'd been put off by some people that she'd known, that she was related to actually, who attended a church and just didn't seem very much like Jesus. But she said to her, if you ever do an alpha course, let me know. Wow. A number of months later, Amanda said, I'm going to do an alpha course. Do you want to come and join me? And they did it, which was fantastic. But anyway, we do need to master the skills. We need to master the patterns that enable us to do this effectively and fruitfully. So that's what we want to talk about. We want to talk about a skill and a pattern that is universal. It'll work in a group you're leading. It'll work in a one-to-one meeting. It'll work in kind of ministry situations when you're just having a conversation with somebody and you can work it. It's a pattern that we've actually been using over this day as well. It's a pattern that hopefully is simple, relational, natural, and intentional. And here's the interesting thing. When I lead a Connect group, I am very intentional about what I do, the different movements through this pattern, even the timings, to be honest, when we move from one to another. But probably, I don't know, they can tell you, probably the people who are in the groups that I lead would not necessarily be able to tell you that, okay, that's what we do. It's like when somebody hugs you, and if you were to hug a skeleton, it's like that would be like weird, right? You need structure, because if you don't have the skeleton, you're going to gloop all over people. Right? So the structure keeps it together, but what people need to experience is the heart, the love, the relationship. So anyway, we're going to work that pattern right now. And I'm going to say, before we talk about any particular moves, this is all in the context of loving friendship and the context of praying without ceasing, praying at all times. So I'm going to invite a few people up onto stage, and we're going to see how we go with this. This is a little bit of a risk, but I'm trusting God it's going to work out in a way that's going to be helpful for you. Rufy, where are you? When you come up here? Rufy, man, take that. Okay. Oh, I know you're nervous, aren't you? Listen, don't be nervous. Right. I'm so thankful for you, man. I mean, I know this is a step out of your comfort zone. Yeah?
Yeah.
But, man, thanks for doing this.
It's okay.
Are you all right?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Are you sure? You want to go through this? Yeah? So it's in the context of loving relationships. That means as soon as people walk in the door, if all they experience is a meeting or a program, it's not going to work. What they experience as they walk through the door is love and loving relationship. So it looks like, how are you doing?
I'm good.
It looks like me saying you don't have to do this if you don't want to.
Yeah, I want to do it.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
I know you're kind of stuck in that, like, it's my comfort zones, it's out of my comfort zones, I want to grow, but like,
Yeah, I'm good.
How things been going for you? Did you have a good lunch?
Yeah, we ate Jollibee, Filipino people.
Use your mic.
Yeah, we ate Jollibee.
Jollibee.
Yeah, with my friends, and it was really great. And we ate chicken. I ate tender juices, new in Jollibee.
Yeah.
And It's quite spicy.
I'm going to be honest with you, man. I'm not a big fan of Jollibee.
Really?
Yeah, I know. But maybe you can educate me.
Yeah, I will.
It'll be something like, Ruth, I know you're looking for work at the moment. How's that going?
It was great, but it's kind of hard because there's a lot of rejection. There's a lot of opportunity, but it was really great because I'm trusting God about everything right now. And I know one day that God told me to have patience to wait. And this season he told me to wait. And I know that in my heart that sometimes God shape you to much a better person.
Yeah.
And for me, patience is really important right now. And yeah.
Shame, man. That's tough, though. I feel for you,
Yeah.
with you. But you know what? I want to encourage you. I've seen this journey that you're on. It's amazing what God is producing. But man, let's just pray for you right now. Lord, I want to pray for Rufy's job. I want to thank you that you have the right job for him at the right time. I want to thank you, even for those interviews he's got coming up this week, Lord God, Father. I pray that you would give him peace about them and able to have the right answers, God, Father. But I pray that you will lead him in your path, Lord God. I pray, thank you that he would find that peace that passes all understanding that keeps his heart and mind, Lord God. I pray for his relationships. I pray for his finances in the meantime, Lord God. I pray that you'll be with him. I pray that you will help him, Lord God. Father, I know you've got a great future for him. Help him in that, we pray, Lord God. Amen. So, okay, you can sit down a minute.
Thank you.
And then this is obviously a little bit awkward and contrived. We're in public, but you understand, it's loving friendships and it's praying at all times. It's not, if your group is just working the program, it'll never work. But if people experience loving Christ-centered community, man, that'll change the world. So, Illuminate, why don't you come up here as well? Okay. Fantastic, man. For the sake of time, when you just take a seat, but thank you. Is there someone else? Is there another volunteer who'd like to come up and join us? Now, listen, there's no pressure. You don't have to have any answers. You just need to probably be a little bit confident to be yourself. Is there anyone who would come up? Anybody who's keen? One there. Okay, fantastic. Come up. Hello. I see your name's Damien. Where are you from?
Cambridge.
There you go. Because we've never met before, have we?
No, we never met before. It's not some magic trick we set up in advance.
I know, it sounds a bit like that, doesn't it? I love your accent, though, man. I always rejoice when I find an English accent. I've lost my accent over many years of being every nationized. I have English people who ask me, where do you come from? It's like, England. So how did you come to find out about us today or join us?
We've got my wife and I just moved to Cambridge a few months ago. We've got some friends who are looking to plant church, so we're supporting them, and we've all come as a group today.
Fantastic. Where did you come from?
Before...
where did you move from?
Living in London, actually, North London, Stoke Newington, in Hackney, if anyone's...
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we do have a gospel around here that London is the greatest city in the world, but we do understand that sometimes people leave it.
I think there's better places.
Fantastic. I mean, out of interest, did you grow up going to church? I mean, obviously you've come to this. Did you grow up going to church? I mean, when did you meet Jesus?
I first kind of 7-8 years of my life did go to church. My dad is still a Christian. It was quite an old traditional church, candles and robes, and I didn't really get it. I didn't really understand the language of Jesus died for your sins, but I didn't know what sins were, so it wasn't very helpful.
Yeah.
But it sort of later on, I started having questions about life, and friends in my life kind of started sharing their faith with me. Had a near-death experience, bit of a longer story, but powerful stuff. And it sort of all came together to find faith around the age of 16.
Awesome, man. And you said you moved with your wife. You got family and stuff?
So we got married about 1.5 years ago.
Oh, okay. So still fresh off the blocks.
No kids yet, but maybe one of these days.
Listen, I have 2 sons, mighty men, 15 and 18. Plenty of time for that.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. When you take a seat as well. I just want, again, this is somebody I haven't met before. And it's a little bit contrived, but we just want to demonstrate It starts with just being curious about people, asking questions and listening, and sometimes listening and remembering. I have a guilty secret. Sometimes I meet a lot of people on a Sunday. Sometimes I use Evernote to help my brain. But there's a value in that, listening to people's lives and their story and family and background. And this informs how we minister. This informs discipleship. We can't do discipleship without that because Jesus is the answer, right? But what is the question? I don't know. If I don't know your question, if I don't know your struggle, if I don't know your pain, how am I ever going to bring Jesus to you as the answer? So if you want to find out more about how do you minister the gospel, not just preach the gospel, join Engage Training. Sign up for that anytime. But anyway, we're going to move on. But the point is, this is true in every area of life. If we'll do this in our workplace, if we'll do this in community, if we'll do this in our small groups, and if we'll do this when we're meeting one-to-one, don't just jump with the program. Don't just jump with the content. Take time to build those bridges, for people to know they're loved and listened to and accepted, because then the truth can drive across that bridge of trust that's been built. Yeah? Okay. Fantastic. Well, let's talk about the pattern. As we said, it's in the context of loving friendships, the context of praying at all times. That also means if we're in a group moment, I'm not so caught up in going through like this chapter or what the Bible says, that if somebody shares something that's difficult and personal and God just needs to minister on the situation, it's like, guys, let's just pray for that right now. We've been going around and somebody shares something, it's like, oh, that sounds tough. Let's just pray for that. That brings God into the center. I mean, it's not something we do apart from him. He is here and he wants to minister by his Spirit. So that's how we do it. Okay, I realize we're going to run out of time here. But okay, so the first thing we do is up. And this is what we started with. So up is basically looking to God, being thankful. And we used to start our groups with good week, bad week. And I realized that while that's good in some ways, it has a downside. That people always tend to be left with focusing on the bad stuff. But isn't that true of our lives, right? But man, if we look up, if we say, what are we thankful for? What has God done? Any of that sort of stuff, it reframes our world in the perspective of who God is. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and remember all his benefits. Illuminate, what's something that you've experienced this week that you can be thankful for?
We had an amazing time at Connect this Thursday.
Yeah?
Yeah, we had a new person joining us.
That's fantastic,
yeah,
man.
That was good. And we had some pizza, which was good also. And yeah, it was just a wonderful time to share with everybody.
Yeah. Are you enjoying leading Connect Group at the moment?
Yes, I am.
Because I know it was a big step for you.
Yes, it was scary at the beginning, but I've had lots of support from you, from many people from the church. Rufy, Lily, it's been good.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Okay, again, so up, we look to God, we remember his benefits, we remember his blessings, so the things that we can be thankful for, the things he's done. I mean, any one of you guys got a prayer that God has answered recently?
Mine is, I'm asking God for an interview, and I have an interview after the student weekend away. And for NHS, because like I'm looking for an admin job for a really long time.
Yeah.
Then I have an interview after student weekend away, and because like for me everything is packed now, because like I need to do something and stuff. And after student away, after that, and everything's been great.
Fantastic, man. Well, we keep praying for that. Okay, again, I mean, sometimes we're so busy to pray, but we forget to actually see, has God answered that prayer? What has he done? So we look up and. Again, if we understand the principle and the pattern, you can use all sorts of questions to get at it, right? Because don't just work through the same question every time. But the point is we look up and we remember who God is. And that promotes a value of worship in us. And that is our value. And it works out and it reframes our world based on who he is and what he has done. So that's up. We look back as well. So looking back is the fact that especially if we're meeting, whether it's one-to-one or as a group, we're on this journey together. So we look back and say, now, how did that go for you? This is how people experience grace. I don't know if you've ever been in one of those groups where it's sort of like, okay, write down your sort of like statement of what you're going to do this week, and then come back, it's like, okay, did you do it? It's like, okay, really, I really failed. Okay, we'll try harder next week. You know, that's not grace. Have you ever been in one of those groups where people stay away because they haven't done what they were supposed to do? It's difficult, isn't it? Listen, I've got to be honest, as a leader, there are some times when I haven't done what I said I was going to do. Everything in me wants to lead my group away from talking about it. But as we go there, how did that go in living that out, that we hear the story? How did that go? And we bring grace, and we experience grace. Grace, the forgiveness, that you are loved. Remember that you don't need to do anything to earn your position with God or with us. You're accepted. But also, grace empowers change, right? Okay, well, you struggled to read the Bible this week, so, well, that's okay. I mean, we've all been there. But let's talk about why is that struggle happening. I'm going to send you something tomorrow morning, and it's going to help you, right? Because I'm going to remember you. So whatever that looks like, grace works out as we look back. So we look back, and that's what helps us take this journey that's accountable, not just we'll talk about something and we never do it, but in the context of grace. What do we do? Who do we share this with this last week? How did that go? So, it was Damien, wasn't it? Yeah, Damien. I mean, what's something you've learned recently about God that you've been applying? How's that been going?
Well, I think I've been, having moved, I've been starting a new job. And so I've been learning all about that job, and I work in a school, and I've been trying to be really intentional about when I discipline the kids, do I do it in a way which is harsh and sharp with them, or do I try and do it in a way which reflects God's character? For me, sometimes that's growing in patience and choosing to show kindness and love, even when that's completely not what I'm feeling.
Yeah. And how's that been going like this last week?
Well, this week's been half term, so it's been very easy.
That's been fantastic, hasn't it? The gift of God, the blessing.
I actually, it has been good because there have been a few colleagues after I started focusing on it more intentionally. I didn't ask them kind of how I was doing or anything, but they said we really see that you actually have a really calming effect on the students. And you really have a good impact on them. So having been in that workplace for a short period of time, hopefully as I'm there over a couple of years, then I'll be a role model where actually maybe not just teaching, but also showing what does it mean and what does it look like to have Jesus in your life throughout ordinary life.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, obviously, in the context of a group where we're meeting together regularly, that would be referring back to something we spoke about last week. But you see, it doesn't have to be so complicated. Depending on where people are. But it's like, what has God been speaking to you about? What have you been applying? How's it been going? What's that look like? Share that. What does it mean to live this life that looks like Jesus? So we look back. The next one is we look in. And now this is where God works in us, and we, work out our salvation with fear and tremble, for God is at work in you. And we need to let him to do some work in us before it works out, right? So we need God to move in power by his word and spirit to bring transformation. And that is at the center of all discipleship. It's trying to lead to that moment where God does something. He convicts of sin, he leads to repentance, he encourages, he changes a mindset. There's a transformation that happens, and it is in this atmosphere of word and spirit. And again, this could be, there's all sorts of ways. This could be, our looking in could be like we're looking at the one-to-one, right? And we're going through that. It could be, well, actually, I gave you a why Jesus, now we're getting together to talk about it. So in this in, we're going to say, like, what did you get out of that? What spoke to you? It could be, we've got some group notes we're going through. It could be, well, I've got my journal here, and this is something that I felt God was speaking to me about this morning, and I wanted to share that with you guys, and we could talk about it together. It could be as simple as saying, if we've got believers in the room, it's like, what has God been speaking to you about recently? What have you been meditating on? How's that been working out in your life? You see, again, it's the move in. What it looks like in your context depends on the journey that you're on. Anyway, but we look in. So for us, guys, we're just going to very quickly look. I'm just keeping an eye on the time. Okay, we're a little bit over, but we'll be fine. Let's very quickly look at Isaiah 40. In fact, let me just say. So Isaiah 40. Man, this has been such strength to me this week. I'm going to be honest, like behind the scenes of like a conference and what we've been doing, I've been feeling shattered. And I started this week not really sleeping for one night before we were launching into this. So like the rest of the week has just been catch up. And to be honest, I've been feeling quite weak in some of those quieter moments. But I was reading this in my journal I've been meditating on this week. So, Rufi, why don't you quickly read Isaiah 40, 28 to 31? Yeah, I got it, man. Thanks.
Have you not known? Have you not heard? The Lord is everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He does not faint or grow weary. His understanding is unsearchable. He gives power to the faint, and to him who has no might he increases strength. Even youth shall faint and be weary, and young men shall fall exhausted. But they who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run, not be weary. They should walk and not faint.
Come on. So again, there might be a bunch of questions you can use, but one simple one is like, as we were reading that, what stood out to you? Olumide, what stood out to you? And again, I'm just directing for the sake of time, but normally it'd be like a bit more of a free conversation.
To be honest, I would need to give you another read, but I think I would say that what stood out to me was how this verse encouraged you. The verse is about coming to God and Him giving us rest, and it's how He encouraged you in that challenging point for you. That's for me. That's something I would note down in case since I know Dan was encouraged by this in his terrible moment. I would note it down for something that could encourage me if I was ever in that kind of situation.
Great. So anyway, we need to cut things a little bit shorter, but I've spoken to so many group leaders who spend so much time preparing for their groups that it actually makes, in some ways, your groups ineffective because it becomes forced and not natural. And I've also spoken to many group leaders who spend so much time preparing for their groups, they don't have time to do the thing which is essential for a group meeting to be effective, which is love people, make time for them, call them, message them. How's that going for you? I know about your life. I know about your story. Yeah? So that's why we know this pattern. It just takes the pressure off. Also, part of that, a couple of simple questions that always are kind of key linchpins is, what does this reveal about God? And what does this reveal about how we're called to live? And again, any bunch of questions that we can have around that, but essentially, who is God from this? What does He promise? What are His attributes? What are His attitudes to where we're at? And how does He call us to live? What does it call us to do? Damien, I'm sure you're familiar with that passage. From that, what stands out to you like how we are called to live?
So one thing that jumps out is that it says that God doesn't grow faint or weary. Many of us in our lives might be we've got kids, it might be we're later on in life, and we do get old and grow weary. We get ill and all sorts of things happen. If God is not like that, then in the moments where we're particularly feeling that, we can come to Him and say, would you now be my strength? Would you fill in the needs that I have? And that will help us to keep going and to go further and to go higher and longer.
Excellent. And, we'd probably say there, we'd talk about waiting on the Lord, because that's what it calls us to do, right? To wait on the Lord. And then we'd have a conversation about waiting is not just like I'm sitting there waiting. Waiting is drawing close. It's drawing close to God and seeing, God, what have you got? Now, as I wait, as I draw close, as I entwine myself with Him, He renews my strength. Okay, so that's in. And then finally we go out. It's like, okay, because we want to live this stuff. What God does in us needs to come out. So how do we live this out? And we can have some conversations about what does that look in practice, how we're going to apply it. But essentially, we want to get to this point of saying, okay, with what we've looked at, what we've spoken about, what are you going to do this week that's going to help you walk this way? Rufi, what are you going to do this week out of what imagine we've had a big, long conversation about it. What are you going to do this week?
For me, it's trusting in Him, trusting God's word. Because sometimes, of course, you always get worried and you always get tired. Sometimes you worry and doubt a lot. But for me, I learned that God is always there by your side. He never give up on you. Even though that you're down, even though don't you worry, God is there for you, always helping you. Even though that you're not even asking it, He's always giving it to you. And yeah.
That's great. So what are you going to do this week?
Yeah. I'm joking. For me is trust in Him, pray for it,
Yeah.
read my Bible.
That's good, man. That's good. So again, it's not like, it can't be forced, it can't be pressured, but we want to move people to a sort of like, God, and again, we've shortcut the whole thing, but we want this conviction. We want God to speak, and then we want to respond to it. How am I going to put that into practice this week? What am I going to do? And that's what also, when we come back next time, when we get together, or when I'm just catching up, it's like, how did that go? You said you were going to read your Bible. What has God been speaking to you about this week? How does that go? Oh, man, I've struggled. Or, yes, it's been amazing. Now, whichever it is, we bring that grace, we bring that love. That's discipleship. And then finally, we point home. That recognizes that we're not strong enough on our own, but we've got a bigger home. We've got church family. All of us need more than just me and Ruthie meeting up in a coffee shop, or even us guys meeting together in our home or wherever we're doing it. We want to point back home and say, okay, guys, we've got this happening at service this week, or you remember like Wolfie preached this message. I know you weren't there, but like check it out online. That's really going to help you. It's going to be good for you. Like we've got this discipleship day coming out. I'm so excited to see how you guys are growing. We've got Joey coming along. It's going to be fantastic. Be there. So up, back, in, out, home. And as I said, praying at all times. If it comes up, then we pray for it along the way. And we make sure, even as we've put that application, we're going to finish with prayer. Because we know apart from Him we can do nothing, right? So this is our discipleship pattern: up, back, in, out, home, worship, faith, grace, word, spirit, transformation, devotion, and mission, fellowship. And we have overrun, but can you give these guys a round of applause? I hope this has been helpful for you.